Hello and welcome to Strictly Speaking, our conversations with theater makers. My name is Jayme Mellema, and I'm the resident scenic designer for University Theater here at NC State. We are so happy to have you joining us tonight for our series. We want to say thank you to all who have come out tonight and for those who have supported arts at NC State in the past, and University Theater, of course. Our guest tonight is costume designer and founder of DASHER Creative and former University Theater costume designer, Jennifer Dasher. Welcome back, Jen.
Hi, Jayme.
It's been a while since I've seen you. Not so long as some of my guests we've had, but I love these excuses to catch up.
I agree. That's the benefit of Zoom, right? Like,
yeah,
maybe the only benefit.
Yeah. So how have you been doing? How are things at the university there?
Well, today they're pretty good. We finished classes yesterday, so feeling a little relief. I know the students aren't because they have to do finals and portfolio reviews and things, but
yeah,
for me, it's like all downhill into summer now, right? Like,
yeah,
do some grading, submit some things, move on to summer. So
great.
they're pretty great at this point.
That's good. Yeah. Did you guys? So do you have any projects you were working on over the semester, or do you have stuff moving forward for beyond?
So we did some Zoom things last summer at the university and then in the fall. And then we moved into like recording on site in different spaces with social distancing protocols, mask protocols in place. That was a huge lift for certain parts of our department, not so much for the costume area, because you can do a fitting in person. There's not a whole lot of creativity that could happen there. So it felt a little bit slow in certain ways and a little bit cumbersome, I think, in other teaching mode ways. We're anticipating being able to perform in the theater in the fall. So that's what we're pretending is happening. I don't know what the audience will look like, right? But we think, there's enough protocols still in place on campus and with the vaccine that our students will at least be able to perform and create real live pieces.
That's the messaging we're getting as well from the university, that we are maybe seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're hoping to have live performance on stage next semester.
Yeah. I will say, like, as much as I'm hoping for it, I'm also like aware that we've been at rest, right? For a year in certain ways. So I don't know if you have any like fear about that out of the gate moment, but I'm like, am I gonna be able to move fast enough? Right.
Oh, 100%. Yes. And I've got projects that I've been working on for almost a year now that will happen next spring, that I'm like, how is that going to factor into everything? And it's the fall and next year is all a little bit scary.
Yeah, agree.
So for folks who have never encountered the land of costumes before, can you give in your own words, like, and define what it means to be a costume designer, and what does that role look like for you?
Sure. First and foremost, it's part of a team, right? And I think that team working towards telling a story is there's many directions, right? You can go, you're a team with the director, you're a team with the actor, you're a team with your co-designers, you're a team with your costume shop and everybody who works in there. But ultimately, hopefully, everyone is working towards the same goal of telling the story. And then from a costume perspective, I think for me, there's two really important things. What's the story and what's the character, right? And what's the psychology of that character, and how can we communicate that out through what they might be wearing or accessorizing with, etc. I think I too see myself as a co-creator with the performer, right? Because the performer's like living that character and I'm like visiting their closet with them.
Yeah, that's a fun way to think about it. I have not thought about it in that way. That's really
Well, I
cool.
think, young performers particularly, I think sometimes are taught they don't have any agency, right, in
Mm,
a fitting and that they should just go with whatever. But I'm always
mhm.
engaging performers about conversations they might have had or feelings they might have had about a character. And, I want to know from a performer if something that I'm choosing they feel is just out of sync with their view of the character, because that little conversation can help me understand too, right?
Mhm.
We can sort of co-create it together within the overarching concept of the show, of course.
Yeah, yeah. How did you first get involved in theater? And what like sort of led you to costumes?
And I did theater in high school, but I did like everything in high school, right? I mean, it's high school. You can do what you want, basically.
Yeah.
And then in college, I was just kind of bored in a lot of my classes, but I was never bored in my theater classes. So I started taking more of them and really found a community of people. And it was more that community than anything else. And the costume end of it, I just tended towards design. I have to be honest, like my brain doesn't work like a scene designer's works, right? I can't spatial relationships in a room. I could forget it, right? Like I would be moving the set pieces around constantly trying to figure out how to make it work. I could never envision that from scratch.
Yeah, that works similar for me. Like I kind of tried a little bit of everything, and but really it was the community that was what was most important to me.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was studying art, and when I realized, oh, I could do art and theater, like and stay with this community, then that was it.
Yeah, I mean, we're just not like people in theater are not built to be in silos creating, right? We're built to have this sort of exchange.
Right. Yes, that's so true. So I'm presume then you did undergrad and graduate school and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Coming out of undergrad, I was like, well, no one's gonna hire me to do anything. I better go to grad school.
I think that's what everybody thinks. And a lot of time I find myself advising students a lot like, why don't you go do something for a little bit? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny now. I mean, I take grad students usually who have experience, right? So
yeah,
even though I was a grad student with very little experience, I now
right.
am, you need some time in the field.
Right, exactly. um, so you ended up here at NC State teaching and designing for a while. Where did your path take you after NC State?
So after NC State, well, first of all, I just want to say, because a lot of the people viewing this are in the NC State community, that hindsight is very much 2020. And I did not appreciate what NC State was when I was there. I mean, I liked it, but NC State is a really special community, and I somehow was so young and like not rooted in myself that I sort of missed the specialness of the community at NC State. So after leaving NC State, I went to the University of Maryland, and then I ultimately went out and freelanced and built a business in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And I think the whole thing that now, of course, I can look back on is like I needed to go do those things so that I would become solid, not just as an individual, but as an artist, right?
Mhm.
Because one of the things I felt at NC State was like students would come asking for advice, and I would think in my head, I can't help you with your life. I don't know what I'm doing with my own life, right? So I needed a few years of like sorting out myself so that I could be better in service of a student.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, now that there's like that space, but at the time, who knows what I was thinking. I who knows. So, but that journey, like, it's super stressful and terrifying to go out and freelance, and you learn a lot of things about the industry doing something like that. You also learn a lot about yourself.
Mhm.
You also force yourself to maybe take jobs that you're either not that into or maybe feel totally unprepared for, but you just have to
Mm,
do it because let's get real, we all have to support ourselves financially somehow.
right. Yeah. Yeah. That, what is the, how did you get to the decision to like, I need to have my own business? I'm
I
sure
think
it's a winding one, but
a little bit. I think there were a couple of things, like I just wanted control over my life, right?
hmm.
Um, I wanted to be able to call all the shots all day, every day, basically. Um, and then I did a project in Washington, D.C., which is the University of Maryland's in the greater DC metro area, um, for the Washington Ballet. And I was the assistant on it. Helen Huang was the costume designer. It was a world premiere ballet. So there was no purchasing costumes. I think it was like 130 ballet costumes had to be built. And
Wow.
there's no costume shop attached to the Washington Ballet, and there's no costume shops in DC like there are, say, in New York City. So a lot
Right.
of my function was to basically beg people to bid on those costumes and to figure out how to get it built in the budget. And so after going through that experience, which this is an image that appeared in the Washington Life magazine, and also appeared on subway ends throughout the city, which was
Oh,
super
fun.
exciting to me, right?
Absolutely.
But after doing all that work of like hunting down shops and finding resources to build this show, I thought there's a real opportunity here, to both be in control of my day-to-day life, and do creative work. So I took a lot of contracts initially in the draping construction end of things out of the DC area, and that sort of created a foundation of a business. There it is.
Fun. So how did you then leap from that to some of the other clients that you've now had, like Cirque du Soleil and some of the other individual talents?
So I actually began my career with Cirque du Soleil straight
That's
out of
right.
grad school. So there was already a fundamental understanding of Cirque that I had. Um, but out of that, I had a lot of friends who had gone to work for Tate Towers, which is in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania, sort of rural central Pennsylvania. And there was a lot going on there, and they were building basically a tech space to bring in all these artists and tech shows. And I thought, you know what, there's going to be work in that area, and it's cheaper in that area than the DC metro area. So I just moved out there. And the Cirque contract, that's the big show that I've done, Taruk, that came through Tate Towers. I had called them randomly, just like I called the president of Tate, Adam Davis, cold called him and like shook in my car, right, as I was leaving him a voicemail. But he called me back for some crazy reason. And I went in and took a tour, and like a month later, they called me in to help work on that project. And we were able to really define the aesthetics of all these small plants that you see in the background of this video. So my shop, we worked with the scenic designer and the engineers. All of these plants come out of a stage deck.
Hmm.
So we worked with the engineers and then the scenic designer to define the aesthetics of those plants, and then figure out how they were going to, the part you see, the pretty part, how that was going to work and cover all the mechanics.
Right.
And then we constructed all 50 of the plants. So it was a big project. It was, I would say,
Yeah.
a project I felt ill prepared to take on, but was like, yeah, let's do this, right? So this is the cactus. You'll see it pop out of the deck here.
I love it.
This video is probably at like midnight or some really like crazy hour. So everything you see is covering the mechanics that are actually making this happen.
Right.
And we just treated it like a character, right?
Yeah.
How would you design this character? And what would the fabric choices be? And then went through a process of like draping and fitting it on this metal structure.
I particularly love the one with the air-filled tubes. They move so amazingly organically.
Yeah, that one was a crazy thing to try. That's me sitting on the ground.
Yeah.
That one was a crazy thing to try to figure out a pattern for.
Yeah.
Well, and this thing like looks like it magically stands up on its own, right? But there's totally fishing line
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
together.
Magic. It's
Right,
magic.
right.
Theater magic. Thanks, Josh. That's really cool. Josh, can you show the one with the inflatables? I forget which one it's
It was
probably,
called the tubulus.
but right, the tubulus.
That looks so much.
Oh, cool. That is just super neat. I've thought about using inflatables in the past. It sounds really scary.
Yeah, I mean, we had a problem at some point with this where like the airflow wasn't enough for the fabric.
Uh-huh.
And this actually, it ended up getting some netting put on top of it. But you know, netting doesn't weigh very much. But
Right. Yeah, I saw just like a fraction of a second of it in that sizzle reel that I was like, ooh, there it is, but it looked different. And I was like, oh, I wonder what they
yeah,
did.
yeah.
What happened to them when at the end? Like they obviously come out, but then how do
Oh,
they go away?
they
This is
go
me
away.
geeking out.
I mean,
Sorry.
they're only out for certain scenes, right?
Yeah.
And then they go away. And so, I mean, the whole show had a lot of video content everywhere, right? Like the
Right.
video content would go over the audience as well. Yeah,
Hmm.
so you can see like all the textures that you see like on the deck or that green thing
Hmm.
in the back, that's all projected on. So,
Gotcha.
you know, Cirque does a really good job when they do like a scenic change where they direct your attention to one very specific space.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then literally all those plants would just disappear back under the deck.
There he is.
Yeah. So I mean, there were also, there's none of them, I don't think, in this clip. There were a bunch of just gray leaf plants too that
Hmm.
popped out of the deck. And that gray was just projection surface. So,
Okay.
I mean, Cirque is just like a feast for the senses, right? All the senses.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enough like geeking out about
It's also
that.
really like, I mean, I get different questions from my students about how did you do that? You know, you're learning how to do theater, which is this box, right? And I'm like, well, wait. It's not a box, right? We're training you in that box. So
Right.
you
So you can,
understand collaboration, teamwork, aesthetics, actual tools of drafting, whatever it might be.
mhm.
But the minute you leave the door, the box is wide open and you can take whatever those skills are and
Yeah.
apply them. That's what was
Yeah.
always cool to me about some of the students at NC State, is they would be bringing these skills in from engineering or design,
Mhm.
fashion, and applying
Mhm.
them within our box.
Right. And then taking what we're teaching them about collaboration, teamwork, and everything you were just talking about, and then taking it out to their industries. That's
Yeah,
part of what we're uniquely doing.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, so Cirque, then just leap to honeymoon in Vegas.
Oh, honeymoon in Vegas was actually before Cirque. You would
Oh,
have thought I
wow.
would have known not to take on a crazy project when I took on Cirque, but like, you know, it's just who says no? Who says no?
Right.
So honeymoon in Vegas. So I had done a small project at the University of Maryland where a grad student had pitched this idea that she wanted the fairies in midsummer to twinkle like fireflies.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, okay, like I don't know how that's gonna happen. But yeah, let me do some research. And it was real early on in the like nanotechnology days. And for that project, I literally Googled LED sequin and came up with these little tiny sewable LEDs.
Yeah.
And so that project was presented in different arenas, and I sort of got this reputation as someone who could do LED costumes. And I was like, I'm not sure that's true, but okay. Um, so I got a call from the costume designer for Honeymoon in Vegas, needing the flying Elvis costumes to have LEDs in them. And, again, opportunity of a lifetime. So
Sure.
I was like, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. So we found a different product this time that was much brighter, right? That's one of the problems with LEDs on stage is they wash really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That was much brighter, and that is Arduino driven. That costume you just saw there. So I think we did 13, 14 of these for Broadway, and of course, you get to first tech and they don't work, and like everybody's really tense, and eventually, after a lot of time in New York, they worked. And that actually one of the leads on that show, Rob McClure, he gave me the biggest compliment. He came to me one day and said, like, this is so user friendly, right? Which of course was all the performer cared about was,
Hey, can I turn it on and off?
can I turn it on and off like that? Is it going to be hard? Do I have to think about it? So when he said that, I felt a little small victory, even though we were still in struggle stages of making them work consistently.
Right.
And since then, so I should also acknowledge, like, yes, this was my project, but there were so many people on this project,
Of course.
engineers who were doing coding. I have a good friend, John Shimon, who's a technical director, who on all of my LED projects is right there with me, right? Like sorting out diagrams for electrical
Right.
schematics, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not somehow this one person who has
Right.
like figured this thing out. It's a big collective of people.
There's a lot of that going on in the cosplay community these days, of people really working with LEDs, and like it's kind of remarkable what's happening in that arena.
It is. It is. I think in theater environments, like particularly a Broadway environment, they're going to
Yeah.
beat those costumes, right? The
Yep.
number that those costumes were in was called Jump Jump. Um, so there was a lot of beating up of the costume going on,
Yeah.
and every night, and like the long-term use is still, I think, a real question in
Oh,
a
for
lot of these
sure.
things.
Yeah.
And it's
So,
definitely not
okay.
something I'm chomping at the bit to continue to do. Like, I mean, I've done projects since then, but every time it comes up, I have to think like,
I was like, do you
am
want to
I
do
am I running the gauntlet or am I not? Right? Like, where are we in this?
That's funny. Can you take us maybe through the process, or what are the major steps along the way from like accepting a position to all the way to getting to opening night? I mean, that's a big chunk, I know, but
Yeah. So I think actually, like, before accepting a position, this is something I harp on with my students, is like asking the right questions, right?
mhm,
Um, in terms of deadlines for sure, but the financial questions in terms of budgeting, the production, obviously, what are you being paid? Things about travel, if you're traveling, right? There's a lot of nuts and bolts before you say, okay, yes, I will do this.
mhm.
And so once you have all those things worked out, and it's yes, I will do this. For me, it's get a hold of the show content as quickly as possible. What's the story? Is there a script? Is it just a choreographer creating work? Is there
Mm.
a video somewhere of that? What can I get a hold of to attach to the project? And then getting a meeting quickly with the director, the choreographer, the creator, right? And just start to open and listen, right? Like go into listening mode, bring nothing to that conversation that's not just coming out, right? Like I go into that conversation super unprepared, um, which, which is purposeful, right? Because the other
Uh-huh.
person is going to say something and it's going to spawn some idea. Um, and then it's really, I'm sure this is exactly what you teach in classes. It's really like going back into yourself and starting a research process, a sketching process, right? And then a rendering process. I mean, that tweaks based on what your specialty is, right? There's drafting in there somewhere for scenic and lighting
For sure.
designers.
Yeah.
Um, and at each point in those processes, continuing to have conversations with um, the director or the choreographer. But then at some point, as you're building more solid ideas, reaching back out to the production manager or shop manager to make sure that what you're putting out there is going to fit into the schedule for the people who are going to produce the
Right.
production, right?
Make the
Um,
things.
yeah, yeah. And I think the other key to it is like just be super responsive and super open, right? Sometimes you think you're gonna submit a drawing, be done with something by the time you're gonna have a conversation, and you're not, right? For whatever
Right.
reason, life happened, the car broke down, whatever. You're suddenly not. But just exposing all of that, like we're all real people trying to do this. Um,
Yeah.
so keeping those touch points going, and then keeping that communication going as the show is realized with whomever, right? If
Right.
you're at a regional theater, you're gonna be flown there at certain points to check in. If you're not able to go, like really getting into some communication modes that are super clear and super
Mhm.
healthy for everybody involved. And then I also always like, you go through fittings, you go through dress rehearsal, the show opens. Are you done? Maybe, maybe not, right? Hypothetically, you're done, but in costume world, don't like leave 1,000 returns for a shop manager to do, right? Like they may do them and they may even say, no, I got this, but like checking back in and making sure the wrap up is complete is super important to that relationship that you're trying to keep, right? Why do a super long production with a group of people and then burn it at the last second?
Yeah. I tend to in a similar way, I tend to leave myself a project. I'll be like, I'll take care of that when I get there so that I can be there in the space working with them and we can communicate, get to know each other. And then there, I'm not the person just sitting back telling everybody what to do. I'm working
Yeah, yeah.
and engaged. And then, yeah, I mean, I don't have as much ability to help out on the return front, but
Sure, sure,
it's
sure.
like
But that's
show opens
always
like
the
bye.
yeah,
But
that's always the thing in costume shops is how many returns are sitting.
right, it's like, okay, well, all those things have to go back.
Right.
So we have a few questions.
Awesome.
Annalise is asking, what is your favorite project or show you have worked on?
Hmm. That's a good question. It probably
I
depends on
know it's always
the
a hard one.
moment a little bit. Well, here, let me tell you about this one because it references this, which is behind me. Jayme, you probably don't recognize it, but it's from NC State.
I recognize it, but I couldn't place it.
So one of my favorite shows, period, whether I've done it or not, and I've done it twice now in some capacity, was A Piece of My Heart.
Mhm.
It was just, this was in the lobby display, right?
That's
And we printed on the plotter and then I took it to keep it as a memory. So it was actually designed, the costumes were designed by Adrienne McKenzie, who I know is
yeah,
still there when she
yeah.
was a student. I don't know if she was a senior or not. That detail eludes me. Um, but she designed it. And for me, what was great at NC State was the way in which we engaged the community on the piece, right? The military community that's in North Carolina was heavily engaged in the piece. And I'm an Air Force brat. So it like connected back and let me sort of do something to honor this
Yeah.
history. So even though it wasn't a show that I designed, it sticks out to me and I keep it on my wall as sort of a reminder of how impactful theater can be when you when you make choices to make it impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen these. Well, we have another question from Maeve. What advice would you give to anyone wanting to start their own business or work for themselves?
So I think, so there's in art world, at least, there's a difference between working for, or there can be a difference between working for yourself and starting a business, right? You can freelance and go contract to contract and be working for yourself, essentially. I mean, yes, you're really working for the theater or company that's hiring you, but you're like a contract worker, right? In tax terms, you're a 1099.
Right.
Um, so you are employing, or they are employing you as a contractor. You have total control over what contracts you take or don't take, but you're not responsible for anyone else, right?
Right.
No one working for you. And so I think that can be really freeing, but I think in the arts, it can also be financially limiting. So one of the reasons I started an actual LLC, limited liability company, which you can do as a 1099 too, not to get confused here. But I started an LLC and employed people. And one of the reasons I did that was I was able to take bigger contracts. And then I was able to make more money, right? Like you can overlap contracts in certain ways if you have people to actually help do the work, which can result in everyone, frankly, being paid more. I'm not advocating that you hire low wage workers and take their money, just to be clear. So the advice that I would give in either of those scenarios, although I think more critical if you're going to employ other people, because there's a lot of responsibility to that. The first thing I would say is like, take a real hard look at your financial situation and maybe have somebody else look at it too. When I did this, I had my dad look at it. My dad is like some crazy financial whiz. And we just really took a long, like, everything we looked at, and can I do this, and how much money do I have to pull in, even just to like afford rent and gas and feed myself, right? The very, very basics. And commit, right? You're going to commit not just your financial picture for a while to it, but you're going to commit your life to it. You're not always going to be able to end the day at 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, right? You're going to have to keep working, and you're going to work harder, hopefully in the beginning. And then eventually there will be this peak moment where you seem to like get up the mountain and you can now coast, and not stop working, right? But like what you're bringing in and the amount of time you're spending are on an even playing field. Not to make it totally a financial question, but we are in a capitalist society, so we do have to answer that question.
Yeah.
And if you don't answer that question early on, I think like you're going to cause yourself a lot of extra stress.
That's a good point. You're also the founder of Empower.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about what that is?
I almost was like, maybe we should remove this question.
It's fine if you don't want to talk about it.
No, it's fine. I just don't know if I can quite like, if essentially, at least in its current mode, which there's been talk about moving it into a more public space. Essentially, it's a group of women, female artists. Some of us are theater artists. There's also like a ceramicist, a few painters, definitely performers. There's about 8 of us that will get together roughly monthly. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Roughly monthly, and it's a support group for us to discuss issues that students are bringing forward.
Oh, interesting.
It's specifically a group of women, with the goal of like having some critical conversations together and then taking the content of those conversations back to the educational realm. there's an idea on the table to like make it a bigger web-based group where
Uh-huh.
literally anyone could engage in the conversation. But there's a lot of web-based infrastructure that nobody seems to have time to get to building.
Right. And it's like
Right.
nobody's interested in that
Yeah.
or able to.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's sort of in a nutshell, like what it is.
That's really cool. That, that like, yeah, you're taking that info and brainstorming it with others and bringing it back
Yeah, I mean,
to,
I'm sure you've had an experience or many where a student comes to you and you're just like, God, like I may not be the best person to address this question, or I want to address this question, but I want to be careful about how I address this scenario. And so it just gives a space to like, without divulging any private information, to really sort of talk through some of these things and hopefully then be able to be a better mentor, advisor, etc.
right. Yeah. Is there a dream show you've been dying to work on, or a theater artist that you're dying to work with?
I very much like take whatever comes my way, right? And sometimes that's like, so I was asked to do a production of Legally Blonde a couple years ago, and I was like, this is not my thing. This is a total fluff piece. Am I doing this? Like, and I said yes, because this is what I do. I say yes as long as I can. Um,
Right.
and I've now worked with that director since then, right? Because that director had a viewpoint of what Legally Blonde was that I did not have, right? So we turned it into a feminist piece of modern, like set in, this is like 2 years ago, so set today essentially.
Right.
And I gained connections out of that,
Yeah.
and I love those people. So, so I'm very much like take whatever comes my way, but I will say like anything I could do to work with Cirque, Disney, those types of creative
Yeah.
people, um, I would totally do that. Now I live, close to Disney, so just put
Where are
that
you
out
at?
for
Oh,
you.
that's right. You're in Florida.
Right, right.
I was, my head was in LA for some reason. I'm like, what?
Oh,
Florida.
no, no. Definitely, definitely wild Florida.
Well, so yeah, you recently rejoined well, semi-recently now, I guess. It's longer than I imagined, but you've rejoined the academic community after having been away for a little while. What made the decision, or what in factored into the decision to come back?
Um, oh my
Money?
God. Should I be honest? No, not money. Although the money, yeah, we'll take the money and the benefits and all the things.
Yeah,
I think given the moment we've been living through as a country for however many years now,
sure.
I felt like I could do more good in education than just in art, right? I mean, art does a lot
Yeah,
of good. Art does a lot of good, but arts education, that for me, I felt did even more good. Uh,
yeah.
so it was really that. And the University of Florida has, well, the College of the Arts has this job. It's called a meta narrative. It goes into every job ad, and
Uh-huh.
right in there it says they want a change maker who will disrupt centers of power. And I was like, them, right? Like this job.
That's what I want.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I just, and now that I'm in it, like students are amazing.
Right.
I mean, education obviously is not always easy, but students are just amazing. The energy
Yeah.
of young people it's just fantastic to be around.
Mm-hmm. I agree, obviously. Okay. So that was inspiring and motivating you then. Do you have anything that's inspiring or motivating you now? I know the pandemic obviously has thrown everything up in the air for a lot of people, particularly artists, but what's keeping you going at the moment?
I
And that
think
can be ice cream. It's fine.
I think partially it's students, right?
Yeah.
Like, partially it's the students. So I also am engaging in this project. We're going to launch a podcast in like a month. And the goal of the podcast, partial goal, there's other more fun, lighthearted topics. But part of the goal of the podcast is I have a great fear that we've all had all these conversations, right, about change in the industry and about sustainability and inclusion and diversity.
Yeah.
I have this fear we're all going to go right back into like the show must go on, right? Which is definitely not sustainable or inclusive.
Right.
So part of the goal of the podcast is to keep that conversation going. And the other critical part, which intersects with students, is that we're all, the hosts of the podcast are all like mid-career professionals, right? We're all in our mid-30s to early 40s, and have been doing this for a hot second.
Right.
So part of the goal is to bring in younger voices to
Mhm.
like pose questions and start pulling back the curtain on some of the topics that like we just had to learn the hard way, right?
Right.
Like, Jayme, how did you get your job? Well, I struggled to figure out how to do that, right? So let's pull back the curtain on some of these structures of the business in the United States and talk about how to make things happen for younger generations. So
Yeah.
we are inviting, for every episode, there's somebody who gets invited in who just asks us a blind question. And then we answer that question. So happy to have any students who want to engage in our podcast. I'm just going to do a little pitch. Sorry.
Sure.
Engage in our podcast in the future to contact me, and you can come on and pitch us any question that you want us to talk about.
That's pretty great.
So that's like, it's time consuming, but it's also like really thrilling to be creating something, right? Like I haven't really created anything in a year, over a year. My last show opened at the end of January 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
When did your show open, Jayme? You must be feeling this.
February of 2020. Well, no, not technically, because I've done some work for some smaller things this semester. I did a student written show, designed a small set for that, and we did some outdoor thing this last couple of weeks. So we devised the show from scratch, and I participated in the writing of that.
Oh, cool.
And the creation of that, and a little bit of the visual stuff for that. So I have done some. So I've kept busy, and I've been working, like I mentioned earlier, on this project I can't really say a whole lot about, but I've been creating from scratch, which has been exciting and challenging. But so that's kept me sort of creatively going, which has been great. Although, awesome. Not every minute of the day. Some days you're like, what am I doing?
Every day.
Was there a non-theater class that you have taken, or a piece of non-theater advice that you got that has proven really invaluable to you?
Funny thing is, you sent me these beforehand and now I have no answer. I mean, I'm sure the answer is yes, right? Like, I'm sure the answer is yes. There was this sociology class. I think about this quite often as we're addressing these topics, right? There was this sociology class in college that I almost became a sociology major because that professor was fantastic, but also like the topics were just engaging, right? And I think about it a lot as we are having these critical conversations in different spaces now, and it ignites me in the same way now as it did then. So I guess that didn't lead to anything necessarily for me, right? Like it's not like I learned a skill that I've kept and used. But I think there's different spaces in which passion can be ignited. outside of the thing you choose to do, right? And at some point you may re-engage with that passion. I know, NC State students like may go off and work in different industries and not do anything with theater for years potentially, and then come back to it, right? When there's when there's time and space in life to come back to some of these things, and you can reignite something really easily.
Yeah. And maybe some of it stuck with you more than you think or realize. I mean, and this may have nothing to do with that class, but I have known you a while, and I know that you're very good at looking at systems
Mm,
and how they work and what things work and don't work, and have that sort of broader, bigger picture kind of view, and you apply that to a lot of things really well. And I have no idea if that has anything to do with
mm.
that class or not, but
I don't know.
I can see
It
the
could,
way that you're thinking and thinking about that kind of
yeah,
stuff. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I think in theater, like literally anything you engage in informs your work.
Yeah,
Anything.
100%. Yeah.
Which is also why we need space to engage,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if you're literally in the theater 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're missing all this other engagement you could be bringing to the theater.
Yeah, completely. What kind of lessons are you hoping that will continue in the industry post-COVID?
Mm. Uh, I don't know how, to be honest, I don't know how any of the lessons continue, right?
Right,
Like because
because the system is set up the way that it's set up.
right, and so I think the system needs to change, but I also
Right,
understand, like I said earlier, we are in a capitalist society, and these two things
right.
are like just at odds with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there are, you know, some ways of honoring the space we've been in for a year. Where I mean, I don't know about you, but last April at some point, I was like, wow, I'm a really great cook when I have time to cook, right? And like I actually do enjoy eating kale and like as long as I have time to like massage the kale so it's edible.
Right.
Um, so there's some learning on the human end that like we're all just humans struggling to make it through whatever moment we're in. And so I think
Yeah,
that kindness could easily be brought to our interactions with each other in the industry without undoing all these systems, right? We could just
sure.
be kinder to each other.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that and thinking that too. I'm hoping that we'll bring that to the table, and I hope that that lasts and becomes, like a habit in a way that like, and it doesn't just fade away, but I hope it becomes the new habit and the new normal, that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's not okay to like yell at people in rehearsal, or like
Right,
or
right.
like 10 out of 12s maybe need to go away. And which, for folks who don't know what those are very long work days where you're working like 10 out of 12 hours.
Yeah, or like
So
12 out of 14 potentially, depending on
yeah,
you
depends on
know.
what you're doing.
Yeah, we're undoing, well, I shouldn't take any credit for it. Our production manager is undoing our 10 out of 12 system
I'm
right now.
we've been we are doing that as well, I believe. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think things will change. How long that lasts and how much that weaves into the new fabric, I guess, is remains to be seen. But
Yeah, I think
um,
it's on all of us though, right? Like,
absolutely.
sometimes you have to turn a job down because they're representing things you don't value.
Hmm.
That's terrifying, but
Right.
that's where we're at now, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me get to the last question because we're getting near the end. So similar to before, what would you say to students or others who are just getting started or just getting interested in costumes? Do you have like a one piece of advice for burgeoning costume designers?
Try it, right? Like whatever it is, if it's an idea, if it's a watercolor technique, if it's rendering via Procreate, drawing via Procreate, if it's embedding an LED in something, just try it. And you know what, if it doesn't work, you learned something. You didn't fail, right? It didn't work, but you have gained something from it not working. Or maybe it'll work, and then you can be totally shocked by that too.
Yes. Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's been so great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Good to
we're
see
gonna-
you again.
Yes, I'm looking forward to doing so again, perhaps someday soon. Have a great night, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.